I put my fingers, I don't know, I'm just trying to figure out what else can I do. Like, I put my hands up to her nose to see if she was breathing, and I didn't feel no air coming out. Like, she got her eye open.
Wait a minute, is she not breathing?
No.
Your child is not breathing?
No.
Because Aniya
looked like an Auschwitz survivor, Your Honor. You could count each rib.
The word stroke carries a weight, a heaviness that conjures images of aging bodies, of lives weathered by time. It's a word reserved for the elderly, a 60-year-old woman buckling under stress, a 70-year-old man whose body betrays him after decades of wear. But when that same word is etched into the autopsy report of a 4-year-old girl, it becomes something else entirely. A grotesque anomaly, a scream in the silence, a crime. Aniya's story is not one of natural causes. It's a story of betrayal, of cruelty so profound it defies comprehension. How does a mother, the very person who carried life into the world, become the architect of its destruction? Sierra Day was only 20 when she had Aniya. Young, yes, but old enough to know the difference between love and torture. And yet, the evidence speaks louder than any excuse she could muster. Bruises, fractures, a brain hemorrhaged beyond repair. This was not an accident. This was a war waged on a child who couldn't fight back. Then there's the boyfriend, a man who dared to utter the words, "I love Aniya," and did not hurt her. Love? Love doesn't leave handprints around a child's throat. Love doesn't stand by while a little girl is broken piece by piece. His words are a mockery, a slap in the face to anyone with a shred of decency. And yet, the law demands he be heard, even as his lies twist the knife deeper into an already gaping wound. Judge Timothy McCormick saw through the charade. In 24 years, I've never seen a more callous disregard for human life, he said, his voice a thunderclap of condemnation. But even his words feel inadequate in the face of such evil. How do you quantify the loss of a child? How do you measure the weight of a life cut short by the very hands meant to protect her? This is not a story for the faint of heart. It's a descent into the darkest corners of humanity, where love is twisted into a weapon, and innocence is sacrificed on the altar of cruelty. If you're not ready to confront the depths of human depravity, turn back now. But if you have the courage to face the truth, stay with me, because this is only the beginning. The questions hang heavy in the air, each one more damning than the last. What kind of mother does this to her child? What kind of man stands by and watches? And how does a 4-year-old girl become a statistic, a footnote in a case file, when she should have been a beacon of joy and possibility? The answers are coming, but be warned, they will not be easy to hear. This is a journey into the heart of darkness, and not everyone will make it out unscathed. Stay tuned. The truth is closer than you think, and it's more horrifying than you can imagine. Welcome to Detective Jeffery Crime Station. A huge thank you to our amazing subscribers and viewers for joining us on this journey into the world of true crime. We're honored that you've chosen to spend your time with us, and we're grateful for your trust and support. If you're new here, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell to stay up to date on our latest captivating stories. Your engagement means the world to us, and we can't wait to share more thrilling and thought-provoking content with you. In the intricate tapestry of human experiences, some stories emerge as profound indictments of our collective moral failure. Aniya Day-Garrett's life was such a story, a haunting melody of innocence crushed beneath the weight of unspeakable cruelty. A narrative that would resonate far beyond the cold walls of a Cleveland courtroom. The story of Aniya Day-Garrett is one that shook a community to its core, a tragic tale of innocence lost and systemic failure. It is a story that begins with hope and ends in despair, a narrative that forces us to confront the darkest corners of human behavior and the institutions meant to protect the vulnerable. This is a heart-wrenching account of a little girl who suffered unimaginably, a child whose cries for help went unanswered until it was too late. Born into a world that seemed determined to challenge her every breath, Aniya entered life with a resilience that would become her most remarkable legacy. Her father, Mickhal Garrett, remembered her as a constellation of possibilities, a child whose spirit burned bright despite the darkness that surrounded her. In his memories, she was more than just a victim. She was a beacon of hope, a testament to the indomitable nature of childhood innocence. The relationship between Sierra Day and Mickhal Garrett was fraught from the beginning, a complicated dance of young love, separation, and competing narratives. Their tumultuous history would become the backdrop against which Aniya's tragedy would unfold, a complex ecosystem of broken promises and shattered expectations. Aniya Day-Garrett was a bright-eyed 4-year-old girl, full of potential and promise. She was the daughter of Sierra Day and Mickhal Garrett, a child who should have been surrounded by love and care, but her life took a tragic turn when her mother entered a relationship with Deonte Lewis. What followed was a harrowing descent into abuse and neglect, a nightmare that would ultimately claim Aniya's life. Deonte Lewis entered this ecosystem like a silent predator, his presence transforming an already fragile family dynamic into a crucible of abuse. He was not merely a stepfather but an architect of destruction, systematically dismantling the protective barriers that should have kept Aniya safe. The warning signs emerged gradually, like whispers that would grow into a thunderous roar of suffering. Daycare workers were the first to notice, subtle changes that spoke volumes. Aniya's vibrant energy began to dim, her laughter becoming a rare currency, her interactions marked by an unnatural guardedness that no 4-year-old should ever possess. "Mommy hurts me." Those 3 words would become a haunting refrain, a plea that echoed through the corridors of Child Protective Services, bouncing off bureaucratic walls that seemed constructed to deflect rather than protect. Mickhal's attempts to intervene read like a Greek tragedy. Each report, each phone call, each desperate plea met with a systemic indifference that would become a death sentence for his daughter. The first signs of trouble were subtle, almost imperceptible to those who didn't know what to look for. Aniya's aunt, Sierra Day's sister, began to notice changes in the little girl's behavior and appearance. At family gatherings, Aniya seemed withdrawn, her usual vivacity replaced by a haunting silence. She no longer laughed or played like other children her age. Instead, she appeared distant, as if she had retreated into a world of her own. Her aunt recalled how Aniya's once chubby cheeks had hollowed out, her small frame becoming increasingly frail. "She was getting smaller and smaller," her aunt later testified, her voice trembling with emotion. "You could see her stomach sticking out, her ribs visible beneath her skin." These physical changes were not the result of natural growth, as some might have assumed. They were the telltale signs of chronic malnutrition and abuse. Aniya's body was slowly wasting away, her organs struggling to function under the strain of neglect. Yet, despite the obvious signs of suffering, no one intervened in time to save her. The Cultural Garden apartment complex in Euclid became more than just a residential space. It transformed into a silent chamber of horrors, its walls absorbing the incremental violence that would slowly consume Aniya. From the outside, it appeared unremarkable, just another dwelling in a suburban landscape. But within its carefully cleaned confines, a nightmare was being meticulously choreographed. Forensic evidence would later reveal a landscape of suffering that defied human comprehension. Aniya's body was not just a victim of physical abuse, but a battlefield where multiple forms of violence converged. The medical examiner's testimony would become a clinical poetry of human cruelty. Black eyes that mapped out a geography of pain, blisters that were more than skin-deep wounds, bed sores that spoke of prolonged neglect, her collapsing lungs, inflamed pancreas, stomach ulcers, each organ a silent witness to a form of abuse that transcended individual malevolence. Sierra Day and Deonte Lewis were not monsters born fully formed, but products of a complex social ecosystem that creates perpetrators as much as it fails victims. Their actions were a culmination of generational trauma, systemic poverty, and a profound lack of understanding about parental responsibility. They had transformed the sacred act of guardianship into its most grotesque perversion. The abuse came to a horrifying climax on March 11, 2018, when authorities were called to the Cultural Garden Apartments in Euclid, Ohio. First responders arrived to find Aniya unresponsive, her tiny body lying lifeless on the living room floor. She was rushed to a nearby hospital, but it was too late. Aniya was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The nurse who attended to her described the scene in haunting detail. She was skin and bones. Her eyes were wide open, her mouth agape. She was bruised, fragile, stiff, and cold. It was a sight that would haunt those who witnessed it for the rest of their lives. An autopsy revealed the full extent of Aniya's suffering. She had died from a stroke caused by a blow to the head, an injury sustained weeks before her death. But that was not all. The medical examiner found evidence of chronic physical abuse and severe malnutrition. Aniya's body bore the scars of a life filled with pain, a black eye, blisters, bed sores, and stomach ulcers. Her lungs were collapsing and her pancreas was inflamed from the lack of food. At just over 3 feet tall, she weighed a mere 26 pounds, a fraction of what a healthy child her size should weigh. Her body mass index was a shocking 11, far below the average of 18 for children her age. The deputy medical examiner, Joseph Felo, testified that Aniya's organs had been slowly failing, her body withering away as it revolted against the abuse. The details of Aniya's final days were pieced together through witness testimony and evidence collected from the apartment. Sierra Day and Deonte Lewis had attempted to cover up the abuse, cleaning the crime scene before calling 911. Detectives noted that the apartment was practically immaculate, with a strong smell of bleach and an array of cleaning supplies lined up on the kitchen counter. Towels in the bathroom were wet, suggesting a hurried attempt to erase any traces of what had transpired. The sheets had been stripped from Aniya's bed, the mattress reeking of urine. In the refrigerator there was no fresh food, only 2 half-eaten bowls of Mexican food left in the microwave. The couple's attempts to conceal their actions only deepened the suspicion surrounding Aniya's death. During interviews with police, Sierra Day provided conflicting accounts of what had happened. In one version, she claimed that Aniya had fallen ill after a trip to Red Lobster, stopped eating, and later fell off the toilet, becoming unresponsive. In another version, she said she had turned on the air conditioner because Aniya complained of the heat, drawn a bath for her, and then found her unresponsive after she fell off the toilet. The inconsistencies in her story raised red flags, further implicating her and Lewis in the tragedy. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel as a means of encouraging us. Thank you as you do so. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Aniya's death was not an isolated incident, but the culmination of prolonged abuse and neglect. Witnesses testified that Aniya had repeatedly told daycare workers and her father, Mickhal Garrett, that "Mommy hurts me." Mickhal, desperate to protect his daughter, had reported the abuse to Cuyahoga County Children and Family Services. But despite his pleas, the agency failed to remove Aniya from her mother's care. It was a failure that would have devastating consequences. The trial of Sierra Day and Deonte Lewis was a somber affair, marked by emotional testimony and harrowing evidence. Jurors heard from Aniya's father, her aunt, detectives, social workers, and medical experts, each painting a picture of a child who had been failed by those who should have protected her. The prosecution argued that both Day and Lewis had failed miserably in their roles as parents, accusing them of abusing Aniya and leaving her to die. The defense, on the other hand, sought to shift the blame, with Lewis's attorney claiming that he had tried to save Aniya by calling 911, and Day's attorney suggesting that her cognitive difficulties made her incapable of understanding the gravity of her actions. But the evidence was overwhelming. Photos of Aniya's emaciated body, the medical examiner's detailed testimony, and the damning accounts of witnesses left little room for doubt. After deliberating for less than a day, the jury returned a guilty verdict, convicting Day and Lewis of aggravated murder, felonious assault, permitting child abuse, endangering children, and tampering with evidence. It was a verdict that brought a measure of justice for Aniya, but it could not undo the pain and suffering she had endured. During the trial, the prosecution would methodically deconstruct the web of lies that Sierra Day and Deonte Lewis had constructed. Their statements were a kaleidoscope of inconsistencies. A fall from a toilet, an air conditioner incident, each narrative more implausible than the last. But truth has a way of breaking through the most carefully constructed facades. The courtroom became more than a legal proceeding. It was a moral excavation, a collective confrontation with the darkest corners of human potential. Family members, law enforcement, social workers, all bore witness to a tragedy that represented a systemic failure more profound than individual actions. In March 2019, Sierra Day and Deonte Lewis were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the judge handed down the sentence, Aniya's father, Mickhal Garrett, sat in the courtroom, his heart heavy with grief and anger. "This is the first step in responsibility and accountability in Aniya's death," said Paul Greco, Mickhal's attorney. "But there are certainly other responsible parties that will be held accountable. The system failed Aniya and the Garrett family, and that system will be held accountable." When the verdict was read, guilty on multiple counts, life without parole, it was more than just a legal judgment. It was a societal reckoning, an acknowledgement that systems designed to protect the most vulnerable had catastrophically failed. Aniya's death sparked outrage and prompted calls for reform. In the wake of the tragedy, Cuyahoga County officials revamped child abuse reporting protocols, vowing to better protect at-risk children. Cuyahoga County was forced to confront its systemic inadequacies, revamping child protection protocols. Her name became synonymous with a call to action, a painful reminder that vigilance is the most fundamental form of compassion. But for Aniya, these changes came too late. Her life was cut short, her potential snuffed out by the very people who should have cherished her. As the community mourned Aniya's passing, they also celebrated her spirit. For Aniya, today is a day for her spirit to be at peace, said Assistant Cuyahoga County Prosecutor Aquila Jordan after the verdict was announced. People finally listened to her, and she was finally heard. Prosecutors argued that Lewis had stood by and allowed the abuse to occur, failing to intervene as Aniya's condition deteriorated. Despite his efforts to appeal his conviction, the Supreme Court of Ohio declined to take up his case, leaving him to serve his life sentence behind bars. At his sentencing, Lewis maintained his innocence, insisting that he loved Aniya and did not hurt her. His defense centered on the claim that he was not directly responsible for the abuse that led to her death. Yet the court found him guilty of aggravated murder, among other charges, and sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict was a reflection of the belief that his inaction had contributed to Aniya's suffering and ultimate demise. Lewis's legal team sought to challenge his conviction, appealing to the Supreme Court of Ohio in the hopes of securing a new trial or a reduced sentence. However, the court's decision on Wednesday dealt a blow to those efforts. In a one-line statement signed by Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor, the court declined to accept jurisdiction over the case. The decision was not unanimous, with a majority of justices expressing interest in hearing the appeal but unable to agree on the specific legal grounds to do so. This procedural impasse left Lewis with no further recourse in the state's highest court. The dissenting opinion, penned by Justice Michael P. Donnelly and joined by Justice Melody J. Stewart, offered a nuanced perspective on the case. Donnelly described the situation as tragic, but raised concerns about the fairness of Lewis's conviction. "It is possible," he wrote, "that the court is making this tragic situation even worse by permitting the conviction and imprisonment of a man who did not cause Aniya's death." He acknowledged that no evidence suggests that Lewis abused Aniya, though he conceded that Lewis did not do anything to help her. Donnelly's dissent highlighted the moral and legal complexities of the case. While he condemned Lewis's behavior as nothing admirable and characterized it as extreme callousness, he questioned whether Lewis's inaction alone was sufficient to justify conviction for aggravated murder. "It is unclear to me whether he purposely caused Aniya's death through his inactions," Donnelly wrote, urging the court to provide guidance on similar cases in the future. In the years that followed, her father Mickhal would transform his immeasurable grief into advocacy. Mickhal Garrett was awarded $3 million after suing Cuyahoga County Children and Family Services, alleging that their inaction contributed to the murder of Aniya Day-Garrett. Each mention of Aniya's name became a challenge to a system that had failed her so completely. Her story transcended individual tragedy, becoming a powerful narrative about the complex intersections of social welfare, family dynamics, and institutional responsibility. The cultural conversation shifted. People began to ask harder questions about child protection, about the invisible chains that can bind children to their tormentors. Aniya was no longer just a victim, but a symbol of resilience, of the potential for systemic transformation. Her spirit, though extinguished in physical form, burned brighter than ever, a beacon of hope illuminating the darkest corners of human indifference. In courtrooms, in social service offices, in community centers, her story would be remembered, not as a tale of ultimate defeat, but as a powerful testament to the importance of seeing, hearing, and protecting those who cannot protect themselves. The final justice was not confined to a courtroom's verdict. It lived in the collective commitment to ensure that no child would again slip through the cracks of a system designed to protect them. Aniya Day-Garrett, 4 years old, infinitely precious, forever remembered, became more than a name. She became a movement, a clarion call for a more compassionate, vigilant society. In the end, her story was not just about loss. It was about potential. The potential we collectively hold to prevent such tragedies, to transform systems, to truly see and protect our most vulnerable members. Aniya's life, though brutally short, would become a lasting testament to the power of bearing witness, of refusing to look away, of choosing compassion over indifference. Aniya's story is a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of vigilance in protecting the most vulnerable among us. It is a call to action, a plea to ensure that no child suffers as she did. Though her life was tragically short, her legacy lives on in the hearts of those who fight for justice and in the reforms inspired by her story. Aniya Day-Garrett may be gone, but she will never be forgotten. We hope you enjoyed the video and learned something new. Because you did, subscribe to our channel and hit the like button to show your appreciation. Additionally, tap the notification bell to be kept abreast with our latest videos and ensure you don't miss out on any new content. This will keep you informed about our upcoming true crime stories and allow you to stay engaged with our community. Thank you once again. Your support means a lot to us.